Good morning, everybody. Welcome to, whoops. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Rise and Grind. I'm 72 the Architect, and today we're going to talk about failing forward. Yeah, that's right. A lesson about failure. Are we really looking at it with the right optics? I believe many people have talked about it. The Stoics believed in about things about failure. So stay tuned as we get started live here on YouTube and Breakout, the social audio app. All right, good morning, everybody. So we're getting going on today's episode. And why is today really important? Well, it's Friday. It's the weekend of Father's Day. So happy Father's Day early to all those fathers out there. On Sunday, make sure that you celebrate your dad or the memory of your dad, no matter what capacity they've served, whether present or not present. I do believe me as a dad, as a father, it's very important that I also celebrate my own father. Now, I may have some misgivings and I may have some misunderstandings between me and my dad, but I still give him praise and I still give him thanks, because there have been many instances where I can say there have things he has done in his little ways that have helped me. But that's also going into this episode about today and failing forward. One of the things I'll definitely say about failing, it's a tool at the end of the day. That's really what it comes down to. It's a tool either for your progress and process or for your basically recession. Many of us are going through a personal recession. We're going through a financial recession. But what can we learn about our failures before we hold others to the fire or hold them to the light about their failures? And when I was reading the Daily Stoic, or actually the Daily Dad, there were some things that came to thought. And when Ryan was talking about Jimmy Carter basically had mentioned a lesson that his father had once given him. Jimmy Carter's dad basically said to him when he was 21, or when he was a teen, he says, "Hey, make me a promise." And he's like, "Yeah, sure, dad, whatever." And he ends up going to say, "Well, I want you to promise me that you will not start smoking cigarettes, or you will not smoke cigarettes until after you're 21 years old." And what I found so interesting about that was at the time in the 1930s, a lot of people smoked. I mean, it was a common thing, even, teens. And that smoking habit led to other issues later in life, and such as cancer and pancreatic cancer and stuff like that. So he goes on to say, and uh, when Jimmy actually turned 21, he did try smoking and he didn't like it at all. He thought it was the most detestable thing. And his brothers and sisters um, did not follow their father's instructions or requests. And they later died of a hard death of dealing with pancreatic cancer. So he goes on to mention in today's Daily Dad, he says, when 21 years old, that in the Naval Academy, young Jimmy Carter finally tried smoking. And by then it was too late. And he missed the window and he hated it. He never smoked another. Tragically, Carter's mother and three siblings followed his father's footsteps. Each one of them died of pancreatic cancer. And Carter, as in his writing, still alive at 98. When it comes to the important things of lifelong implications, you have to make them a promise, as Carter's father did. But you also have to learn from his failure, and he led by example. The cost of not doing it could be everything. Now, I find that interesting, especially going into today. And what I think about, it's Friday. Many of you will be ending the work week today. You'll probably be celebrating, gathering together, maybe going camping or a barbecue, maybe a restaurant, thinking of ways of how you can either praise your dad or celebrate him if that's your choosing. And usually Father's Day is like kind of like one of those overlooked things. But when I think about being a father, I also think about my failures. Did I really succeed my children? Did I give them the right kind of lessons? Did I give them the right kind of tools to handle life as mentally as it comes? And many of us don't really think or reflect on our failures. But considering I'm 50 years old and I've looked past it in my life and I've looked at, my shortcomings, my failures, and I look at like what did I actually learn? What have I can say that has been a true gem? And when it comes to failures, it's really interesting about how others will treat you according to your failures, especially your loved ones. Me and my lady were having a discussion. We were talking about my new show coming up, which I'm actually going to talk about here in just a moment. But we were talking, and I asked her an opinion about the title of my new show. And she says, it's hard for me to answer because I have a biased opinion. And I said, please do tell. And she told me the reasons why. And I said, okay, I appreciate that. And in their view, when you talk about stoicism and you talk about um, what is a stoic is someone who is learning about emotional behavior for your benefit. That's really what it is. It's not a guy like, hey, you can't move them, you can't shake them. They have feelings, and every single stoic out there never thought to themselves to necessarily be a stoic. They're more like, I'm learning constantly as life progresses. I I gauge, I learn. Sometimes I have to go through lessons, the same lesson over and over and over again. But when we look at what actually comes with it, anyone could be a stoic, a male or woman, man or woman, doesn't matter. Child, elderly, it doesn't matter where your status is, what you identify as. It's the purpose of you studying and learning from your mistakes in your emotions and what you hold and how you can help become a really better human being. That's really what stoicism is all about, is just to become a better human being. It's not to say I'm a judge and, blah, blah, blah. I'm never going to be affected. And when I think about these things and I think about the failing of forward, you know, there were times I couldn't match up. I wanted to give my daughters certain things, and I could not afford them at the time. And I tried and tried and tried, and I couldn't keep my word sometimes. And that's one of the most precious things that fathers could do, is to keep their word, and especially to their children and to your better half, your partners. And as I was talking to my girl, and she, she explained, and I said, "You know what? I'm not emotionally affected by your response. I understand where I failed you." But I asked the question in return. I said, "How long will you hold on to my failures over my head, and what benefit does that do to you?" Because I apologize for my failure, and sometimes I'm going to repeat the same damn thing, but each time I'm going to try it with better zeal and more understanding. And so I said, "You know what? Thank you for letting me know. It's okay. You don't have to tell me." And then there was a break. She's all, "You know what? I do like your show, but I just want you to understand where parts of me doesn't trust you, or parts of me doesn't really relate to what you're teaching or what you're saying." And then that's why I told her, I was like, "Hey, this is what a stoic is. And do you even know?" And this training that I've undertaken is a lifelong thing. And some of these lessons may stick very well and I'll be able to exemplify them, and others I won't. But that doesn't stop me from going forward. And by doing this, it allows me to explore, what the options are. So now we get to really the subject hand of failure and how people hold them. Sometimes they hold them as tokens and tickets and receipts. And they will say to you, you did this because you acted this way, or you had done this. Perfect example. When I heard a phrase by Steve Harvey, and he was talking about, in one of his reels, he was basically saying, well, you know, it's not always once a cheater, always a cheater, as an example. Eventually, people mature and they grow up and they don't continue. Just by that alone really depictates what failure can be like. People can prejudge you based on your misgivings, and it was only a period of time, like an alcoholic. I know several. Matter of fact, one of my good friends, Patrick, from a podcast called We Live on a Planet, this guy's been sober for a long time. He's been through the whirlwind. And every time I talk to Patrick, it's always a light. It's like a lighthouse, and it's just light. He lights the world up with his calm demeanor, and he owns what has actually been his greatest failure, but it also was a failure that failed him forward. And when you talk to Patrick and you listen to him, he gets sponsors and he gets paid. And this guy started the same time I did in podcasting. And what's so interesting is that he never is overcritical of himself. At least he tries not to be anyway in front of me. And he acknowledges, hey, being sober, he would say like maybe 4,000 or 5,000 days sober or something like that. Or whatever it is right now, I forget, but he's been sober for quite a while. And so he always gives the praise that, being sober is a gift. It is a privilege. And because I failed and I've got to that point, I live in a more fulfilling life. And those lessons along the way, including the months, if I, you know, and the more that I listen to him, it's like he's someone I can relate to. He learned his lesson, however many times it needed to take place, but the lesson was really the gem. It propelled him forward. And some people say, well, you're an alkie, you're an addict, and you're never going to get any better. People make these judgments. And when they make these judgments, what sound really decision can they say that they're not being judged by the same measure? And who has the right to keep holding things over your head? Well, the answer is very simple. The answer is nobody has the right to hold any decision over your head. Even criminals that have committed the most heinous crimes they have done, and they are going to pay for the consequences with consequences. And it's interesting because when I listen to some of these, sometimes I hear these podcasts talking about death row inmates, and some of them are very calm and some are violent, and they're just like, hey, there's no way of getting out of this, and I accept my responsibility. And they go off into, that good night, and they're no longer here. So how we judge failure by even the most heinous of terms and status is by how do we judge ourselves? And that can be extremely brutal. Imagine, yeah, my partner's told me, like, I failed her. Sometimes I've lied, and sometimes I've not been the greatest guy. But that doesn't stop me from trying to become an excellent human being. I can't tell you how many times I remember in college, for as an example, trying to take statistics. I failed it twice going into it. And then the third time I passed. That to me, like so many others, will say math is not my gig. Well, of course not, unless you train it to be. And on the third time, because I failed the two previous times, the third time everything clicked. It just meant that I needed more practice, needed more time. It wasn't the instructor's fault. It was my fault. But that's the other part about failing forward, is that you have to move beyond fault. When you look at fault of yourself, when you look at fault of another, how is it benefiting you? Is it an example to, like, hey, like Jimmy Carter's dad saying, promise me you won't do this. And Jimmy Carter took a whiff and said, no, forget this, threw it away, never touched the thing again. And yet he became one of the most amazing humanitarians I've ever seen, even as a president. I mean, he has been praised more about his post presidency and all the works for Habitat for Humanity. This guy does so much. He's a peacemaker. This guy lives by his word. And when you're living like and training to be a stoic, you're going to constantly not meet the mark. Because when you tell people, like, yo, I'm in stoicism, they're going to be like, oh, they're going to look at you with a different skew, a different view, and they're going to look at you in such a way where, wait a minute, are you really represent what I think a stoic is? And it doesn't matter how much you try to explain it or defend yourself. It really comes down to a point of view where you believe, and this is a better way. And the thing about that I like about stoicism and being a father and being a podcaster and even talking to you now is it gives me a gauge of how to improve my self beliefs, my interpretations of my ideas, to not be so impulsive all the time, but also understand when my impulses are in control. How can I reel it back? When I look at these things and I tell people, like, look, this is a better way of doing. It's not saying that I haven't gone through the trials and tribulations. More likely I have. I've failed personally, professionally. I have failed many times, but that does not stop me from going forward. And because my desire to go forward, no matter how many times I don't understand things emotionally or logically, and does not stop me from wanting to learn. And the best way I could represent it to young people is like, imagine playing your video game and you can't get past first level on the first day. Sometimes you have to take a break, come back, play again, reset, do it again, do it again, do it again. And no one wants to talk about all those failures because it's boring. It doesn't uplift us. It doesn't make us feel great when we have to say, well, I'm inadequate. I have not passed. Just like my school, there were times I failed courses in high school. I remember I had such a hard time in certain subject matters. I was not an A student, but that didn't stop me from desiring to be a learner, to being an adult, because I knew what I came from. I knew that what I came from if I didn't get much help from my parents, it's going to be all on me. That self-reliance. And see, this is why I'm a big proponent of keeping your goals quiet. Because the less you mention goals to others, unless they're qualified to help you along that way, there's no need, because you will not get the slander, you will not get the bad word, you will not get the judgment, because more times than none, people who judge you on your goals are either ill-equipped, unqualified, and they never done it themselves. Imagine that. Imagine when you were growing up and you wanted to be, say, like a firefighter, and you're not the strongest guy, or you wanted to become a doctor and you weren't an A student. That doesn't stop you from going and persisting of finding a method, a route to what you really desire. I mean, I've met a few people that have gone overseas to go to med school and then come back and have to kind of do it again in a way. But that doesn't mean that what was in their heart was wrong, regardless of their academic level here in the US. They made it a way to find, I can do this. I want to do this. And they've persisted. And some of them become great scholars. You know, your failure indicates a lot of things. It doesn't mean it's a taboo, like, whoa, I shouldn't do this ever again. And that's where many of us are. Many of us are in this place when we look at failure, my fate is sealed. Some things it is, a lot of things it's not. And the way that we hold failure to other people outside of us, oh, I don't want to talk to that person. They're a bunch of drama. Well, maybe they were at a period of time. Maybe they were for, instances, but that doesn't mean forever. I can't tell you how many times when I first made my first podcast, which was Good Vibes with Jason Beats on Apple, very arrogant, very charged, very angry. But when I looked at what I had to learn, I learned how to, you know, cultivate my voice, learn about how to breathe as I speak, learn about pace, being relatable, taking all these books and scholarly things that I became a great student. I became a Stoic, and I'm still in the process of learning about Stoicism. But when I learn at it, it's like, hey, no matter how many times I've had to read sometimes some pages 10 times over because I did not understand. It did not comprehend it. It did not build. So what I want everyone to think about today, when you think about whatever you're attempting, before you make those self-acknowledgement judgments outwardly, I'm not that smart. I'm not scholarly. I'm not that strong. You can stop even the sarcasm of it. Stop affirming what can be changed. Okay, I'm not at that level yet, but that's not going to stop me. And when we understand and appreciate the level of our humanity, that it can grow. See, the human being is capable of doing so much. But when we realize how powerful our mind really is, you may not have been a good reader right now, but you can train to be. So, and that's pretty much it. Think about your failure as a tool. Think about it after you failed, now you can go and start thinking what success really means to you. Think about how the success is going to be the true finish line, whatever you want to become. So and that's pretty much my lesson for today, or my talk for today. But I'm going to bring up a few people. And Julie Locum, thank you so much for joining us here. Prof T and Caroline. For those of you who've been here listening, I appreciate, and I would love to hear your guys' take on what you think about failure or failing forward. So the mic is open to everybody. So if anyone wants to take a stab at it, or give your thoughts about what I've been talking about, or what you think about failing forward means to you. Okay. Hold on one second. Let's see. For some reason, I couldn't hear her, but I'm going to do something real quick.
Are you failing right now, Prof T?
There we go.
I thought I was talking.
Yeah, you are. You are. My mic was not working with me for a second here. There we go. Now I should be able to hear you. There we are.
Let's go. Isn't failure everything? I want to hear what Prof T has to say.
Sure, go right ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. This is Teresa Agostinelli. For those of you who don't know, Prof T from Philly, where it's raining. So, I love the topic, and John Maxwell actually wrote a book about that. And I think that this is what someone told me a long time ago, that failures are inevitable and they're going to come. It's what you do with them that counts. And I can tell you that for such a long time, I got myself stuck in this, hit the pause button, rewind and play, and it can send you down rabbit trails. So with that said, I'll keep it short. I think that failure is a part of life. It's what you do with it that counts. And I really don't like to look at it as a failure. I like to look at it as a learning lesson and the opportunity to go to the next level, because that's where the rubber meets the road, folks. You learn to be resilient. You learn to tap into your inner guidance system. And I'll leave with this. What I have learned is that when I have what are perceived as failures, it has helped me to learn what not to do when moving forward. So love the topic, here to listen and learn. And thank you for having me.
Just a quick question, Teresa. So has there ever been an instance where you were failing and it just took your persistence, like a tweak here or there on something, and then you succeeded, but you failed many times, in your attempts? It just took some crafting, a little bit, maybe more time, or just being patient with the pace of things.
That is a great question. And this is what I've learned. Slow and steady wins the race. Now, when I was first starting out in my private practice as a licensed clinical psychotherapist, I just wanted to save the world. And I wanted to have a full book of clients. And I wanted to just be the best, do the best, have the best, because that's how my mind works. Like, if I was brought up in a home where if you got a B, why didn't you get an A? If you got a job, why aren't you the manager? And if you're the manager, why aren't you the owner? And if you're the owner, then why don't you own 3 companies? So there was always this, got to be a step ahead, got to be a step ahead. Here's what I learned in putting my private practice together. I made a lot of mistakes because I just made some impetuous decisions. And I'm not the kind of person that likes to sit and wait for things to happen. I make stuff happen. I get my shiitake mushrooms in order and I make stuff happen. And this is what I learned. Slow and steady wins the race. Surround yourself with people who know what they're doing. Surround yourself with people who are where you want to be. And even though you make mistakes, as long as you're moving forward. I made some mistakes that cost me money, cost me time, cost me friends. cost me business relationships. I made a lot of mistakes. Those are the things I could talk at length about. Those were the things that really got my attention and burned and made me do better. I hope that answers the question. Thanks.
I think it's more than hope. I think that's reality, because anything great, any person that has done something beyond what the normal capacity you've been able to do says it all. When you had to see things through, as far as when it comes to failure and approaching anything in life, I think that there is. I mean, think about how many times did it take you to start walking? Did you? Some people are like, little ones. They don't crawl. They just they just like prop themselves next to a couch or a chair, and within days they're walking. But does that mention all the times they fell on their butt or fell on their face? You know, I mean, even the simple thing, what should be simple to us, learning to walk. If you had to process and teach that to a machine, there's so many different facets of the dynamics of what it takes to make a robot walk, which they're just now doing in tech. So I think that's saying a lot. And knowing that you're going to do it, you've been through this most of your life, but it really comes to mind where it's like, when we fail, we kind of feel like this level of shame when we're going through it. Like we don't want people to see it. Like, don't look at me when I'm failing, because we're either the sarcasm, making fun of you, or whatever's going to come out. And some people let it scar them. Other people are like, dust myself off. Going to keep going at it again. So, yeah. Anyone else care to comment about failing forward and the benefits of it? Anyone care to answer?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Oh, Caroline, do you want to go next?
No, go ahead, Julie, and then I'll go.
I think my comment is, it just kind of reminded me of one of my favorite thought leaders, if you will. Can you guess who that is, Jason?
I don't know.
Besides
Me?
Jason.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Of Dragon?
I know.
I don't know. Gary V? I don't know. Who could it
No.
be?
I did talk to him about his failures and regrets, but Brene Brown.
Oh, okay.
I love Brene Brown. Do you know her?
I do not. I've heard that name so often, so forgive me.
Dare to Lead. She's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's just like straight talk, and she's like, I love her. The thing is that the reason why I love her so much, and the reason why I connect with her as a thought leader, is because she shares her failures. She shares her missteps, her mistakes, with a layer of such vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And she does speak to vulnerability, and vulnerability really is a true testament to being a leader. I'm not saying release too much information, TMI, but let people know those struggles. And what does that do? That I believe sparks, connection, creativity, and most importantly, trust. When you are not on this pedestal pretending like you are thebomb.com, you are someone that embraces your failures, your missteps, your struggles, and shares it. That's where like the true connection is born, I believe. So that would be my share. I love myself some Brene Brown. Don't forget it. Brene Brown, like the color.
And I like that. Like I said, I've heard of Brene Brown, but I've never listened or saw a lecture. I don't know why. Maybe just I wasn't meant for it yet, but who knows? We'll see what happens. So
I need to interview her. I'm putting that out in the world. She's my next like she's the person I want to go and meet next. Okay. So.
There we go. I've got my 5. I know who I want to interview, and I'll talk about that. But Caroline, you wanted to say something. What would you like to share?
Sure. So for me, my biggest failure almost cost me my career. I failed my microbiology class when I was in nursing school, and it was very, very hard class. So, I had to accept that I failed it, and I had a decision to make. Am I going to continue going to school, or am I just going to give up and say, I'm not cut out for this, I'm not good enough? So, I discovered why I didn't fail, or why I did fail it. So I said, what can I do to do this? So I decided, of course, I would need to take the class over. I discovered, steps. I devoted more time to studying. I had to turn down invitations with my friends to go out and party, and I was younger, and do things, and join a study group. Spent more time in the lab. So, it helped me to learn that just because you fail at something doesn't mean you cannot succeed. And it helped me, with life. You have to be resilient, and you have to be prepared to fail, because none of us are perfect. We're going to fail at other things as well. So for me, it helped me to realize, that you just if you want something bad enough, you have to continue. You have to identify what you did wrong, correct those mistakes, and not give up.
And I like that a lot. I like the word you used, resilient, because it says a lot about a person. When you talk to someone and you ask them, do you know what that means? Do you know what resilient means? And I'm always testing people, on the word resilient, or resonant. And the definition of it is, there's actually two. It's able to withstand and recover quickly or from difficult conditions, but it also is able to recoil and spring back into shape after bending and stretching or being compressed or compromised. That right there says a lot about failure, because when you listen to guys like, for example, David Goggins, the guy went through BUDS, which is the Navy SEAL training, which is extreme to most human standards. Like, there's a, what is it, a 60 to 70% failure rate for everyone who goes and attempts. And he talks about that in his book, Can't Hurt Me. And also in his latest book, I'm forgetting the title of it, but when he talks about failure, he talks about get tough, can't hurt me mentally with this, make it harder on me, because once you make it harder on me and I'm going to get through and I bust through, that tells a lot about somebody, and that's the big thing is I'm a big proponent of helping people fail forward. I'm in a big proponent of when someone is not succeeding and they're losing the faith. And I'm like, look, you're going to be a crybaby about it? Let's look at really why you are failing, not your fault. Look at what you're failing at. What do you not recognize? And by sometimes encouraging people and having one-on-one saying, look, this is not personal, but you're making it personal. You're making it where you are choosing this failure to hurt you instead of, I can understand microbiology. I can tell you what it's like to go through chem, and those things. But it goes further than that. Those are just the obstacles. That's all they are. And on the other side, guess what? You have something, you have a potential to doing what you really want. But many of us talk ourselves out of it because our comparison, our contrast, the failure sets in. And it's like, am I really good enough? Don't know until you've been tested enough. And when that test comes, are you going to quit? Are you going to cry about it? Or are you going to be like, look, let me take a step back. Maybe I have to take this 3 times. Maybe I have to do that. So welcome to the stage, Jessica. So glad to see you. I know you haven't been here for the show, but I'm sure you have some thoughts about, failure and failing forward as a process, as a tool. And I don't want to necessarily put you on the spot, but we'll also want to give you the opportunity to express yourself about what do you think about failing forward, if you care to answer.
Um, uh, we've had kind of this talk, and Jules definitely knows. I'm in Walmart, but I actually came to like kind of an aisle to be alone because this was super interesting about failing forward. Just to me, to hear the term failing, I know it sounds bad to a lot of people, but I when I look in the mirror, that's just what I see. But that's because of so much that I've gone through that, I'm not everyone is privy to. But failing forward, like literally that really caught my ear because I've never really heard that.
Mhm.
So it just has thinking, to be honestly. I'm just in a right now, yes, am I in a dark time? Yes. But I have someone who reminds me there is someone out there who is way, way worse than I am, and to be grateful for what little I have, despite everything that's going through. I hope that maybe answers your question.
I don't think it's a hope. I think that's an affirmation. I think that's an affirmative. And, you know, it's the self contrast that we involve ourselves with when we look at sometimes our mind is overly invested into something and it takes us a minute or two. It takes, when I find people that are having such a hard time in life, the number one thing they say, I need to get organized. The second thing they'll say, I need to get disciplined. I need discipline. But why they fail and they stay where they're at starts with what they say and what they believe instead of zip it. When you're failing, get quiet. That's my number one recommendation. When you fail, get quiet, quiet your mind, you know? And Marcus Aurelius talked about this in his meditations because he's talking about in 7.7, his chapter 7 or book 7, he talks about, when you're failing, also don't be afraid to ask for help. There's nothing wrong with being ashamed of getting help. Matter of fact, the quote he says, don't be ashamed of needing help. You have a duty to fulfill, just like a soldier on the wall to battle. So, what are you injured and can't climb without another's help? See, we take on too much many times. We look at someone else and think, well, they've done it better than I have. But I was just thinking this last night and I was like, wait a second. I've managed to reach a certain educational height, a certain professional height. And I think about my family that live in Mexico who do not have this opportunity that I have, who do not have, but yet they live so much happier. What was the illusion? Why do I have to boil in my brain and they can be so happy? And when I've talked to them in the past, the one thing they would say is it's like, I don't forget what's important to me. My success and my trials and tribulations are just markers. There's going to be new goals. There's going to be things that after I reach this level, but I appreciate every step I've made. And by thinking that way and adopting, it's like, you know what? Jess, you were just kind of talking about, about failure in a way where it could be a taboo. And you feel like the world is like it's like the spotlights are on you. It's getting hot. You don't want to see me. I feel embarrassed. I feel insecure. I start adopting labels and things. I can't tell you how many people have told me they have ADHD, ADD, or explained their deficit without me even knowing anything positive about them. They're really trying to say, forgive me because I am flawed. Instead of be like, I don't need to know your failure. I don't need to know where you're inadequate. I just need to know, hey, what you got bringing to the table. And people know me, like I can be very staunch about my opinion. I can be very hardcore, so to speak. But my statements, I recoil and I learn from my mistake about how I deliver to people. And I try not to over compare myself. And then when I say to people, well, yeah, you know what? Hey, I have Asperger's. What is that like? It's like being like Sheldon Cooper from the Big Bang Theory. You think without having feelings, unfiltered. And some people say, well, you need to say things a little nicer or softer or put yourself in their position. And usually the one to kind of break me down, I've got to give my woman a lot of credit in this. She'll be like, look, babe, you went too far. You need to think about that. I want you to try to put yourself in another's walk. And she's right at times. But then there's times where it's like, she's like, you're on the money. I can't get away from this. And it's their benefit. And when we make it personal and relatable of our real experiences on failure, it's not such a bad taboo. It's not like a chain and ball or a heavy rook on your back. If you look at people and you see how look at their shoulder. This is a challenge for anyone. Look at their shoulders when they walk or way they sit. Do they hunch over? Do they have their head pointed down most of the time? Don't look. It shows it's a physical symptom of what people can do to their body because what they believe in their mind, and it comes from failure. It comes from disbelief. It comes from a lot of areas. So, Jessica, I've known you for a short period of time. And what I can tell you is, and just like in our personal conversation, if no one believes in you, you can start, because once one starts, more. And when people want to hold you to a fire for whatever the hell you've done in your past, those people,
Hello.
yeah, those people are flickers of a flame. They burn up. Because more curious people, when you start really embracing that, yeah, man, hey, I couldn't do it when I was 40. Well, all right, I'm 50 now. I'm doing it. I'm doing my thing. I'm happy about it. Don't rain on my parade. Like, you're going to do that. And like I said before, people compare what they don't know. So if you want to attempt something, be an educator, be whatever, an upgrade, maybe a world speaker, yeah, they're going to laugh at you. But when you start doing it, because there are strangers, people who do not have that personal reliance or relationship of experience of you, then it transforms and then it transcends, because then the volume speaks. Your walk, your talk, your presentation changes the dynamic of how you are. So thank you so much for explaining that. Any closing comments before I close out the show? Anything that anyone would like to bring up that I'm talking about that maybe touches your mind before I close the show out today?
Well, I would like to add that I do agree with you that when you do meet somebody that they just tell you all their faults and things like that without you even knowing them. And you're right, you don't need to know all that. But with me, I actually do have diagnosed ADD, which you mentioned, and I'm actually on medication for it. But a pill is not going to just fix anything. So if I meet someone and if I care about what they think about me, and if I want to have a relationship with them, I let them know, not just to say, hey, guess what? I have ADD. But if I find myself having trouble controlling, interrupting, I do like to share with them the fact that I do have the diagnosed ADD, because I think interrupting is very rude. And, I don't want to be rude to people. And so, I only do it just so that not to make them say, okay, we're going to give her a pass because she has ADD. No, I want them to understand that I'm working on it and I try really hard. And, social audio apps are hard for me because, I've learned the best way for me to not interrupt someone is watch them, of course, look at them while you're speaking to them, but I can tell when their lips quit moving that they have finished talking. So, that's why the apps are hard for me. And, you can't just always watch the little circle to see when they turn their mic off.
I agree.
And especially if you have your earbuds in, because some people leave their mics open and even during a whole show, so that part is hard. But like I said, I only bring up that part of me if I care about what they think about me, if I like them as a person. And I just wanted to know that even though I have that, I am working on it, and, to just try to realize I'm not just trying to not listen to what you're saying just so I can speak next. It's just a genuine flaw that I have, but I accept it and I work on it. But yeah, I don't just tell anybody that. So I agree with what you said. Don't just meet someone and tell them all of your faults. I mean, if you just met someone and you're telling them all the negatives about you, well, is that person going to even want to be your friend? Probably not.
Yeah, they kind of
So I do
give you like,
agree.
what, I don't know what ADD is. Like when I first started hearing people say it,
Right.
I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't know where you're getting with that. Does that make me want to feel sorry for you? No, it doesn't. And that's where I've just been like, I am learning as best I can as a philosopher, as a stoic, as a father, as a friend, or acquaintance to people, learn to accept people for where they're at, not comparison to where they should be at. And that says a lot because like people who have this condition, people are adopting it without being diagnosed properly. And a lot of times, from what I've seen, it's bad diet, sleep, too much stress, and they have the attention span of a squirrel because they have so many things coming at them. And some of the most simplest remedies, like maybe reduce your screen time, reduce what's your active time. Where are you tending to your mental wealth, not health, mental wealth? Are you building it? And this touches on failing forward. And I'm glad you said something about social audio, because when you go into other apps and people are just jamming popcorn comment and trying to be the loudest so they can be heard, it doesn't make great conversation. It just makes people sensationalists. And you know what, Carolina, and everyone in here, I really got to thank you all because everyone has been well mannered, paced. I feel that you guys are welcome here. There's no stress here. You can be yourselves, whatever capacity you feel that is. And in my rooms, I usually hold space very well. And what I mean by that is I let everyone have their say. When you let everyone have their say, and even I'm long-winded, I'll admit it. But at the same time, this is my show, what I'm here to make. And I ask people, so I'm a 50-50 sometimes guy where I can talk 50% of the time and then I can listen to 50% of the time. And that's my asset. I don't look as my deficit, it's my asset. So but
And I do love your rooms. And you did let me know that, hey, if it happens, I get it, it'll happen. But for any of your listeners that maybe have, the same problem, I would do have a tip for them. And that is, if you're on this app, you just have to keep your finger away from that microphone button, not jump in, but take notes. So
yes.
on the social audio app, like right now, I already have a whole page of notes and it kept me from hitting that button, and it helped me to remember what I wanted to contribute on something that you said without actually interrupting you. So I just wanted to, tell somebody that, if they have the same problem, take notes because it helps.
Yeah, it does. I take notes when I read. Like I said, sometimes I'll be responsible for reading 250 pages in a day. I've got to read documents that are long and verbose, and I'm just like, I really don't want to read, for example, a deposition. I don't want to read the transcripts, or testimonies. I don't want to read all that. And I have to go through a highlighter and I have my pencil. And sometimes I read it out loud, record it, and then I listen to what I just read so that my mind, when it decides to get squirrely and go somewhere else, give myself reference breaks so I can come back to it, shift and hyper focus on what needs to take place. And that's the thing, is that I'm not perfect, but I'm good at what I do. And I'm becoming a better human being for it. So I allow myself, hey, I may have failed, spent 3 hours trying to read 10 pages and I didn't get a damn thing. And then when I scale back, okay, what questions am I can't answer because I don't understand? What is being presented that I may need to ask a question about what's transpiring and taking place? If it's not making sense with my common sense, okay, time to put on the super brain, put on the graduate cap. Okay, God gave me the opportunity to finish my education. All right, let's see how smart I really am. But I allow myself, even sometimes with that hint of failure, to be like, okay, we're going back, and there's other times where you're like, screw it. I just got to keep coming back. I'll mark this down. I'll come back later. I got to just I can't get stuck on one thing. And a lot of people are stuck right there. They're stuck on that one thing that seems like a mountain when it's really a molehill. And maybe the answer was just further down the road. It's like, imagine starting. How many of you guys, if you don't mind me asking, how many of you are readers and you've gotten stuck on the first 2 chapters and you're like, man, this book sucks, these first couple of chapters, but you know what? You gave yourself some space and it got
I don't
better.
just read it then.
What's that?
I don't read it then,
Mm,
if I'm not connecting with the words, I'll just be like, okay, pass.
sometimes that happens. But have you ever come across the opportunity? Go ahead, Caroline.
I'm sorry, that was one of those slips. I was too close to the microphone button.
It's okay.
For me, you asked if we're readers. Me, I'm not, because I can't stay focused on the
You're
book.
going to be a writer soon, right, Caroline?
Perhaps I will. I'm really considering it. Yes. But yes, for me, I'm not a reader, so I just can't.
I've got a personal challenge for you, Caroline. What if
I'll take it.
What if we were to create a room one day a week for 30 minutes or an hour, and you've got to pick, I don't care what book you have on your shelf, but one you've wanted to read, you just couldn't stay focused. What if you read to me 3 pages, at a time? Like, just read 3 pages, see what you got out of it. Believe it or not, I bet I could transform that thought, I'm not a reader, to I read. And then it goes to I read well. What would you say?
I think that would be great. And I actually have a book that I've wanted to read, and at the end of June, I've had it for a year. And actually, it's Ori's book, y'all.
Well,
and I love Ori, but I just can't get myself to sit down and read the book.
but if you were on the mic and you had to read, I've got Ori's book on my shelf. Matter of fact, I just talked to him yesterday. And he came in my room and I said, Ori, your book is next after the one I'm reading right now. And I gave it an appointment. I gave it a target date. I read books sometimes 2 a week, sometimes 1 a week. It really depends. And this is where I got to bring up an individual that I've revisited, that we've talked about on the big idea. And I'm rereading Jim Quick's Limitless. And what's interesting about Limitless, he talks about, first he's got to separate all your innuendos, all those things that you've made, your faults or whatever. He literally says we've got to retrain your brain of how it works, of what it's gotten used to. So we've got to work with other things. And he talks about transforming the process. A guy who had a brain injury, just a little background on this guy. He talks about, after a certain accident where he hit his head, cracked his skull, he had to relearn how to learn, how to memorize, how to process things. And because he's one of the most sought after speakers. And because the reason why I went back and visited him is because, one, Julie saw him at VidCon, and I kind of forgot about him. I just kind of like, whatever. I've heard about his stuff. I think I read his book a while back. As a matter of fact, I think I gave his book away when it first came out, when I got it, because I was like, this is not catching my attention. But then when I revisited, I was like, wait a second. I've heard him in his clips and his reels. Let me go back. So I purchased it again. And here I am. I'm plugging away. I'm in chapter 5, I believe, and I have my notes and my highlights. So I'll tell you what, Caroline, I will make it a personal appointment. We sit down and you just read to me a couple pages, and then we'll kind of talk about those couple pages. Because what's going to happen is when you start reading out loud, there's this thing in your mind that will start actualizing, because you're going to start worrying whether you're going to say it right or wrong, whether you're going to stutter or not, but the thoughts become alive. And once they become alive, a book transcribes you in time. So think about this. A book was written in a certain date, but you now become in what they call a live time. And when that switch turns on and you get it in repetition, that alive time transcends you into a different status, going from I'm not a good reader at all to I read, and do it enough times and do it over and over, just like James Clear's Atomic Habits. You do this habitually, you build up the habit. The identity of what you just said no longer exists. But people say the same thing about mathematics. Until you put it to practice, it stays the same. And if you need someone to like, hey, sit down with you and talk about what you just read and work with however your I'll say hyper ability, then we can do that. And I give you my word on that. So,
Well, I appreciate that. I really do. And I like what you said about, setting the time aside and, getting into setting that time and actually doing it. And that will help me see that, hey, I do enjoy this. So, yeah, I would love that. And I thank you. And we do follow each other. So you could send me a message
I
and we
will.
could set that up. And I
Yeah, I
tell you
will.
what I'll read is I also have purchased a couple of new books on dementia.
Mhm.
And you were in the dementia room and you had a grandparent. I believe that you want to
Yeah,
know more about it.
I
So that
do.
way it would be something interesting for you as well. Thank you.
Yeah. And that's to me also failing forward, because if I can help somebody do something that really doesn't cost me too much of my time, it's really just a simple thing of being. Another thing that you don't realize is you're a listener. And see, listeners have a special thing. Real listeners have a special quality because they actualize in their minds. They take more decisive points instead of judgments and be like, oh man, I just don't get it. Allowing yourself to grow. Anyhow, that's going to be pretty much. I've gone almost an hour, which is usually normal out of my norm. This is a recording on Breakout Social Audio app, as well as on YouTube. It's titled Rise and Grind with 72 the Architect, Failing Forward. I will be live on Monday, 7 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, with Julie and Dr. JC on The Big Idea. So if you want to tune in, you can check us out on Clubhouse and the Breakout Social Audio app, available everybody. And I will try to also talk to my the co-host that I'm involved with, these wonderful people, about how we can get it published and make it happen. We're going to be talking about networking on Monday. So make sure you tune in 7 a.m. on the Breakout Social Audio app, available on your app stores. Thank you, guys. You guys all have a great day. Enjoy your weekend and celebrate those dads out there. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate y'all.
Thank you for the room. It was great.